Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into something called the narrative advantage in education. We're looking at a really fundamental shift in how we approach learning and student memory, specifically why narratives actually succeed where traditional, fact-based lectures kind of fall flat. Let's get right into it.
Facts are forgotten. Stories are remembered. Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because this isn't just some catchy phrase. It's a profound philosophical hook from our source material that completely challenges traditional teaching methods. Think about it. We spend so much time building these exhaustive lists of facts, dates, formulas, the whole shebang. But raw data, no matter how accurate or vital it is, simply doesn't stick on its own. The human brain just isn't wired to act as a filing cabinet for random pieces of information, right? It is wired for narrative. When we frame information as a story, we suddenly give all those floating facts a home, a clear context, and a really compelling reason to be remembered.
And that brings us directly to the core issue, the problem with isolated facts. When we rely on traditional lectures that just fire off disconnected data points, we're setting ourselves up for an uphill battle. The problem isn't the student's effort, and it's certainly not that the facts aren't important. The real issue is the isolation. Without a narrative thread to sort of bind everything together, those isolated facts become incredibly fragile in a student's memory. It is so validating, honestly, to acknowledge that frustration we feel when material is just instantly forgotten.
To really visualize this, think about the huge contrast between presenting isolated facts and visualizing ideas. Presenting isolated facts, it's abstract, it can be super dry, and as we just established, it leads to rapid forgetting. But when we visualize ideas and connect them to real life, when we use stories to make the abstract concrete, we bridge a really critical gap. It answers that eternal, echoing student question, why do I actually need to know this? It basically replaces the heavy cognitive load of blind memorization with the crystal clarity of a real-world scenario.
So how do we actually bridge that gap? What's the underlying psychological aha moment that makes visualization so much more effective? Well, here is the core explanation derived straight from our source. Emotion strengthens student memory. This is absolutely crucial to understanding how deep learning actually works. It's not just about spaced repetition or highlighting textbooks. The literal secret ingredient to long-term retention is emotion. When a student feels something, whether that's curiosity, surprise, empathy, or even just the satisfaction of solving a narrative puzzle, that emotional response acts like a powerful superglue for memory. It chemically signals to the brain, hey, this matters, keep this safe.
And this brilliantly illustrates the causal relationship laid out in our source text. It's a simple two-step process. Step 1, stories create emotion. Step 2, emotion strengthens memory. It's an undeniable chain reaction. By telling a story, you generate an emotional response. You pull the listener in, making them actually invest in an outcome. And once that emotion is triggered, the memory of those embedded facts is automatically strengthened. It's just an elegant formula. You don't have to force memorization if you can successfully engage emotions through a narrative. Retention just happens as a natural, effortless byproduct.
Okay, so how do we take this psychological theory and actually use it in practice? Shifting away from those fact-heavy lectures doesn't require some massive Hollywood production budget or a complete overhaul of everything you know. It simply requires a shift in your framing. Let's look at some practical classroom strategies you can use to teach concepts using narrative.
The source gives us a very clear directive here. Teach concepts through stories, examples, and relatable experiences. These are your 3 primary everyday tools for building those emotional connections. First up, stories. This could be something like the dramatic historical background of a scientific discovery, or a tale about someone using a math formula to solve a huge problem. Second, examples. This means taking an abstract concept and showing exactly what it looks like in a tangible scenario. And third, relatable experiences. Connecting the lesson directly to the student's everyday life. Using these tools naturally generates the emotion that cements memory, transforming you from just a distributor of isolated facts into a master storyteller of concepts.
Now for your mini takeaway. Let's see how you can build this into your own daily practice. We've looked at the problem with isolated facts, unpacked the science of how emotion acts as that adhesive for memory, and we now have our 3 specific tools. So the invitation here is for you to take this theory and apply it practically in the coming days. Because learning about the narrative advantage is just the first step. The real magic happens when you actively shift your communication style. Start small, Look at your next presentation or lesson plan. Find just one area where you're currently presenting an isolated fact and challenge yourself to wrap it in a compelling narrative instead.
Which brings us to a provocative final thought to wrap up this explainer. Which concept will you turn into a story this week? Pause and really think about this for a second. Identify one dry concept you usually just lecture on and commit to finding the story behind it. Find that relatable experience, generate that emotion, and just watch what happens to audience retention and engagement. I guarantee you're going to notice a massive difference because, as we learned today, facts are forgotten, but stories are remembered. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.